取得彪炳史册的辉煌成就。
Two of the most powerful governments on Earth just drew a line. Within hours of Iran naming a new supreme leader, Beijing issued a warning against any foreign interference, and Moscow pledged unwavering support. The statements arrived while the bombs were still falling on Tehran. They arrived while Israel was publicly threatening to hunt whoever filled the role. And they arrived before most of the world had even processed the name Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the man the US-Israeli strikes reportedly killed 8 days earlier. This was not routine diplomacy. This was a geopolitical claim, staked fast, aimed directly at Washington and Tel Aviv. Beijing moved quickly. The foreign ministry issued a statement that went beyond diplomatic routine. China opposes interference in other countries' internal affairs under any pretext, the spokesperson said. Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity should be respected. Beijing called the selection a decision made by Iran based on its constitution. The language was precise. It did not endorse Mojtaba personally. It endorsed Iran's right to choose. And read in context, that language sounded like a warning to Washington and Tel Aviv. Backing off would be wiser than escalation. China also reiterated its broader demand. China calls for an immediate stop to military operations, a return to dialogue and negotiations as soon as possible, and preventing further escalation of tensions, the spokesperson said. Read in isolation, that sounds like standard diplomatic language. Read against the backdrop of a new supreme leader being named in the middle of a war, with Israel publicly threatening to assassinate whoever fills the role. It sounds like a shield. Russia followed within hours. President Vladimir Putin sent a direct message to Mojtaba Khamenei. At a time when Iran is confronting armed aggression, your efforts in this high position will undoubtedly require great courage and dedication, Putin wrote. For my part, I would like to confirm our unwavering support for Tehran and solidarity with our Iranian friends. I am confident that you will continue your father's work with honor and unite the Iranian people in the face of severe trials. That is not a diplomatic pleasantry. That is a geopolitical commitment delivered personally to a leader who has held the title for less than 24 hours. Putin's framing was deliberate. He acknowledged the danger, he acknowledged the war, and he positioned Russia as a backer of continuity, signaling that Moscow considers the new supreme leader legitimate, even if the extent of that backing remains unclear. Whether that support extends beyond rhetoric, whether it includes intelligence, material, or strategic coordination, is an open question. But the public commitment was immediate and unambiguous. In the language of great power politics, speed of recognition is itself a weapon. The faster a new leader is legitimized by major capitals, the harder it becomes for adversaries to treat the succession as illegitimate. Together, the two powers moved to wrap Iran's new leader in fast diplomatic cover within hours of his appointment. That cover is not military, it is political. It raises the cost of targeting Mojtaba by making any assassination attempt far more likely to be read in Beijing and Moscow as a direct challenge, not just a strike on Iran. The speed of the diplomatic response suggests both capitals were prepared for a rapid succession, but there is no public evidence that Beijing and Moscow had advance knowledge of the final choice. The timing of the China-Russia statements invited questions about how prepared both capitals were for the succession. Hours before Mojtaba's selection was announced, the Israeli Defense Forces had issued one of the most provocative statements of the war. After neutralizing the tyrant Khamenei, the IDF said the terrorist regime of Iran is attempting to rebuild itself and select a new leader. We want to tell you that the hand of the State of Israel will continue to pursue every successor. We warn all those who intend to participate in the successor selection meeting that we will not hesitate to target you either. That statement was extraordinary. It was not a warning about military assets. It was a direct threat against a political process. Israel was telling Iran's Assembly of Experts, the body constitutionally mandated to select the supreme leader, that participating in the selection would make them assassination targets. Beijing and Moscow responded by wrapping the new leader in diplomatic recognition almost as soon as the appointment became public. The message to Israel: this leader is recognized, and threatening him carries consequences beyond Tehran. President Trump added his own layer. On March 8th, Trump said that whoever is ultimately chosen without full U.S. approval absolutely will not last long. The statement frames the selection of a foreign leader as something requiring American permission, a line Tehran can now use to argue this war is about more than nuclear weapons. Washington answered with its own framing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Iran was trying to hold the world hostage and described the regime in openly terrorist terms. The language was aimed at delegitimizing the succession China was treating as an internal constitutional matter, and Russia was openly backing. Tehran calls it constitutional continuity. Washington calls it a terrorist state rebuilding itself. The succession itself defied every threat. Mojtaba Khamenei, selected by the Assembly of Experts in what state media described as a constitutional process, now holds the most powerful position in the Islamic Republic. It was not a compromise candidate. It was not a reformist. It was the son of the man whose reported killing started this war. Trump had publicly opposed his selection, making clear that Washington did not welcome a dynastic succession within the Khamenei family. Iran proceeded anyway, under bombardment. The Assembly of Experts met under wartime conditions unprecedented in recent decades, with even the selection process itself publicly threatened by the IDF. Every member who participated did so, knowing Israel had named them as targets. The selection proceeded anyway. That fact alone tells a story about the internal cohesion of Iran's clerical establishment during wartime. Whether that defiance strengthens or weakens Iran's position depends on what comes next. The defiance was not abstract. It was personal. Each cleric who cast a vote for Mojtaba did so with the IDF's threat ringing in their ears. That they voted anyway under those conditions is either an act of institutional courage or a calculation that the diplomatic shield from Beijing and Moscow would hold. Either way, the succession is now a fact. What came next was immediate. The IRGC said it launched a new round of attacks after Mojtaba's appointment, though outside reporting has not fully verified the exact missile types or the operation name being circulated. If the operation name is accurate, it would frame the campaign in overtly religious and political terms tied to continuity at the top. It would tell the rank and file that the chain of command is intact, that the Supreme Leader's authority has transferred, and that the war continues under sacred obligation. Iranian state media and other reports said the armed forces vowed to act more powerfully against Iran's enemies under the new leader. The language escalated beyond previous communiques. It was not just a promise to continue. It was a promise to intensify. Whether Mojtaba commands the same loyalty his father did is untested, but the IRGC is publicly betting that he does. And in a war where morale and cohesion matter as much as missile stockpiles, that bet may be the most important wager Tehran has made since February 28th. Then came a report that complicated everything. According to Iran International, Mojtaba Khamenei may have been injured during the ongoing war. State media hinted at something without confirming details. If the new supreme leader was wounded within hours of assuming power, it would represent the most dramatic vulnerability in Iran's leadership since the revolution. If the report is inaccurate, it may be an attempt by opposition media to destabilize the transition. Either way, the claim is circulating. Consider the sequence. Khamenei killed on February 28th. 8 days of power vacuum. Assembly of Experts convenes under threat of Israeli assassination. Son selected as successor. China and Russia recognize him within hours. IRGC claims a barrage in his name. Armed forces vow to fight harder. And then, on the same day, reports emerge that the new leader may already be wounded. If that sequence holds, Iran is trying to project strength and continuity while questions swirl over the condition of its new supreme leader. Return to the line that Beijing and Moscow drew. Israel now faces a calculation. The IDF said it would pursue every successor. Trump said, whoever is chosen will not last long. But the successor now has the explicit backing of China and Russia. Targeting Mojtaba would not just be an act of war against Iran. It would also confront two governments that have already moved publicly to defend the succession from outside interference. That does not make the threat impossible, but it makes the cost dramatically higher. What Beijing and Moscow did in those first hours was not just diplomacy, it was a repositioning. They turned an internal Iranian succession into a test of the international order, recognize the new leader, or challenge the two powers that back him, accept the constitutional process, or declare war on it. The framing forces every government in the world to pick a side, not on Mojtaba personally, but on whether a sovereign state has the right to choose its own leader during a war. Mojtaba Khamenei holds the most powerful position in the Islamic Republic. His father was killed 8 days ago. His allies recognized him almost as soon as the appointment became public. His enemies have promised to hunt him. The IRGC claimed a new barrage after his appointment, and opposition media now says he may already have been wounded. The seat is no longer empty, and the two governments that moved fastest to fill the silence around it are the same two that sit on the UN Security Council with veto power. That is not a coincidence. That is a message. Subscribe to WLA for daily geopolitical analysis.